I had taken this class called Pinnacle Productivity where we break down our time. And I was like, oh, personal time, okay, that's when I'm, after the girls are taken care of and dinner's, made and the dishes are put away or whatever. I might have some personal time at the end of the day, or that's when I'm not working, right? Is my personal time. And then the instructor of the course, when I took it, said, well, personal time is not doing the laundry. It's not washing the dishes. It's not going to the grocery store. It's not getting the oil changed in your car. I was like, oh, well, that's what my personal time is, right? So as a working mom, that was my personal time. And so then they explained, what are the things that bring you joy? And I had kind of lost sight of that. And so I really had to think and journal about it and really say, what does bring me joy? What recharges my batteries, right? Not as a mom, not as a family, as a caregiver, all of that kind of stuff. But what really recharges my batteries?
Welcome to Small Acts of Rebellion, a podcast where the unspoken narratives at the intersection of our personal and professional lives come to light. I'm your host, Heather Pridemore, your guide on this journey of discovery and defiance. Join me as we uncover the rebellious spirit that shapes our careers and lives. It's time to own your story. Are you ready? Today I'm joined by Mary Gaul, owner of 2 businesses for over 10 years, a speaker and author of 2 books, and a certified business coach who guides entrepreneurs to find practical solutions and new ideas for growth and success. She helps them to see the big picture, prioritize goals and strategies, and helps hold them accountable while having some fun and building joyful profits. Welcome to the show, Mary.
Thank you. Thank you, Heather. I'm so excited to be here.
Now, Mary, we travel in some similar circles, but my favorite thing when we get to spend time together is your networking event. So you do an event called Networking on the Water, and it's paddleboarding. And so I've recently been talking a lot more about networking on this show because let's be honest, most people hate networking, like the concept, the way we think about it. And so how did you come up with networking on the water?
I attended a class that I now teach, a course that I now teach called Pinnacle Productivity. And we learned about how we're spending our time. And the first big chunk of time you should always put on your calendar is personal time, right? Which is always what most people put on, they squeeze it in whenever they can, right? So in that class, we learned about personal time and what is personal time and how does it recharge your batteries? And I had kind of lost that in my work world, and I was working full time and raising my kids and volunteering and all that stuff. And I kind of had lost what brings me joy. And once I took that class, I was like, I got to find some things that bring me joy. And being on the water, fellow mermaid, being on, or around, or in water always makes me happy and brings me joy. And so I talked to my girls. My oldest daughter was already in college and my youngest was a senior in high school. I knew we had limited summers left. And so I told them, I was like, okay, mark off the first and third Thursday mornings. You can be at work by 1:00, but we're going to take the mornings and go paddleboard together. So we did that first summer. And it was the best summer ever. We just had so much fun being on the water and still getting in some of our work day and everything else just kind of squeezed in where it was, but we were putting our personal time first. And then the next year they had full-time jobs and stayed at college and didn't come home. And so I was like, I'm just going to invite my network to come out with me. So this is our 8th season, 8th summer doing that, and just inviting people to come out and hang out with us on the water. And it's just so much fun. It's just, we're entrepreneurs for time freedom, right? So why not make some time on a Friday morning and come out and enjoy some sunshine? So I just absolutely love it. So glad that you've been out with us as well.
I appreciate it, Mary. I am one of those people who I'm a natural introvert. Like being around people, especially people I don't know, is very taxing on me.
Mhm.
And I have always dreaded networking events for that reason. Now, I've worked in sales, customer support, customer success for a really long time. And I've adapted. I've
Yeah.
adapted to those environments. But what I loved about coming to your event for the very first time was it gave me a chance to really kind of reframe how I thought about networking. And it really opened my mind up to there were a lot of things that I would do normally that I could now say, I'm going to go and network at that event, right? So taking things I already enjoy and being able to put a little bit of a networking spin on it. But then also because yours is so fun, I just keep coming
Yeah.
back. So
Yay. I love it. I love it. Yeah. And people that like you said, they don't like networking, or they've adapted to a style of networking where you go and meet a few people and pass some business cards, right? But this is just something different. Nobody has business cards on them because we're on the water, right? And so it's really fun. You're outside. We have different level conversations, sometimes more personal, what's going on in our real lives, our real world lives. And, we do talk about business and what books we're reading and that kind of stuff. So it's really just been so much fun, and it does add so much joy to my world. I look forward to Fridays during the summer, and I'm sad that it's already August because it means our season's so short. It's going to come to an end in about a month.
Well, I think that's a great segue, Mary, because one of the things I wanted to talk to you about today was the concept of joy. And I think we're seeing a lot in our, like today's work culture where you're hearing a lot more about things like flow state and the importance of play. And so there's like this emphasis on really improving our work life integration. And I would like to hear from you how throughout your career journey and your own personal experiences, you've really shaped this approach to incorporating joy into your work and your life.
Yes, I love that question. I always have been a glass half full kind of person, right? So I tend to lean on the more positive side of things. But you used the word reframe before, and I think that's such a powerful word. And it's a powerful tool when we can grab that mental tool of reframing the situation. And how can I find some joy in the situation? Because, I came from the corporate world. I was in that environment for 30 years. And there are days when it's hard to find the joy in your work, right? Or in your office mates or whatever tasks you have in front of you. And there's always something to be joyful about. And so it's just really a matter of reframing it and finding something to be happy about. I just have always been able to do that. And I think that mental tool can serve you in so many areas of your life, right? In your relationships, as a parent, as a volunteer, just as a member of society, right? If we can reframe things into a more positive light, it helps you get through all of those rough times. And yes, we all have rough times, we all have bad days, we all have jobs, the aspects of our jobs we may not like. But if you can find the things that you do like, what are the things that bring you joy in your job, in your work, with your coworkers, then focus on those things. Where we put our attention manifests more, I believe, right? So if you're focusing on all of the negative things, that's what you're going to generate more and more of that. So let's reframe it and let's see how we can put more joy into our world. So I've used that tool throughout my whole career. And then always being curious, I think another one for me is raising my hand. If I see a problem and there's a solution, or even if I don't know what the solution is, but I can identify a problem, then I was always one to raise my hand and say, hey, this is happening. Can I try and find a solution? Right. So again, focusing on the positive side of things, that reframe instead of complaining about the thing that's wrong. Let me see if I can find a solution to that, or can I be part of the solution to that problem? I think helps reframe it. It gives you more of that sense of purpose in your work, and, makes you feel a part of something. I love to solve problems. So if I can be a part of the solution, then that makes me feel, gives me more joy, and it makes me feel like I'm doing something of value to the company. So I just think those two things, the reframe and then raising your hand and saying, hey, let me be part of the solution, can really help you be more joyful in your work.
Now, Mary, you seem a little ahead of the curve. And what I mean by that is at least the stories I was told growing up and coming up through my career is that like work is work, right? And so there was generally this attitude that you were sort of a serious professional and you did your work at work and your personal life was your personal life. And you kind of kept all of these things very compartmentalized from one another. And so that has been at least my perspective and experience. And only recently do I feel like this idea of better integration between work and life and incorporating joy and play and flow and all of these sort of what kind of feel like new age concepts are really starting to come to the forefront. And so I guess my question to you then from all of that, Mary, is like, How did you get there? What like led to you being a little bit ahead of the rest of us on some of these concepts?
It's one of those things I've just always done. So like I said, I've always just tended towards more of the positive. So I think that's just my mental state from the very beginning has always been more, let's find the good in the situation and doing stuff that you love, right? So I mentioned when I started on the water networking, I had taken this class called Pinnacle Productivity where we break down our time and I was like, oh, personal time, okay, that's when I'm, after the girls are taken care of and dinner's, made and the dishes are put away or whatever, I might have some personal time at the end of the day, or that's when I'm not working, right? Is my personal time. And then the instructor of the course, when I took it, said, well, personal time is not doing the laundry. It's not washing the dishes. It's not going to the grocery store. It's not getting the oil changed in your car. I was like, oh, well, that's what my personal time is, right? So as a working mom, that was my personal time. And so then they explained, what are the things that bring you joy? And I had kind of lost sight of that. And so I really had to think and journal about it and really say, what does bring me joy? What recharges my batteries, right? Not as a mom, not as a family, as a caregiver, all of that kind of stuff. But what really recharges my batteries? And it's being on the water is one of those. So that's where I started that. And then I realized I was reading all these books that were business books. And I used to love to read fiction books as well. And I hadn't read a fiction book in a long time. So I started a book club in my neighborhood 7 years ago. And we meet once a month and we read all kinds of books and we get to, strengthen our neighborhood relationships. And so that doesn't necessarily fit into my work life. I still read a lot of business books, but I do read the fiction books as well, because I think that we need to find that. I don't like the word balance because balance is a static thing, right? But I like the word blend. So if you imagine like a big swirly tie dye with all the colors blending in and out of each other, that's what I think of as life, right? So that's my little hippie way of bringing my life into focus, right? So we have this blend of all of these colors of different areas of our lives, and they're all swirling around all the time, right? They're never static. It's never perfectly this box and this box and this box, right? So the more you get used to that blend and that kind of flow in between, okay, I'm showing up here as a networker, and then I might go to the next thing and I'm showing up as a volunteer or a mom or a spouse or or as a businesswoman, right? So I can show up. I think if you're congruent with who you are, you can show up in all of those aspects, all of those different colors of your life, true to yourself. And showing up for me, to be true to myself is to show up in a joyful way, right? And I realize not everybody is born that way. And some people have a more, glass half empty point of view of the world. And that's fine. That's their perspective. That's their reality, right? But I just think the one thing I can control is my attitude. And so if I choose to say, I want to have a more positive attitude, I can look for something positive in the situation.
I think there's something really interesting there, Mary, that I kind of just want to sort of, I don't know, emphasize. And,
Mhm.
you're really talking about being in alignment with your values. And so
Yes.
what I love that you just said and what really resonates and something I've experienced myself is that when you can show up in a more holistic fashion and candidly, there was a period in my career where that was really challenging for me. I was in environments where being a more whole version of myself, posed some issues. And it
Mhm.
also meant that I was doing a lot of like sort of code switching and trying to like fit into places and leaving aspects of myself at the door. And that gets really taxing. It's very tiring. It's energy zapping. And so what I really want to emphasize for those listening is what you just said. It's important to find that authenticity and get in alignment with your values. And that makes showing up in all those different places so much more easy, right?
Yes. Mhm. It does. It does. I didn't, I had taken some personality assessments and those kind of things through my corporate career as well. And those were insightful, but again, it depends on the environment that you're in, right? So when I was running a law firm, I can't show up and be talking about paddleboarding and being a mermaid, right? Exactly. but I can show up in a different positive way, right? So that's a more buttoned down kind of, more professional setting than definitely I project when I'm in my own business, right? I get to have more freedom to show up as I am. But I still was always like, let me look for the positive. Let me, again, what kind of problems can I solve? How can I be part of a solution if there is something everybody's complaining about? What can I do to make it more positive? What can I do to help fix the problem or make it, a little bit easier for everybody else? So I think that those two keys really do serve you well, no matter what environment you have to be in. And then again, looking for the kind of career that does let you be more of yourself, right? I think after COVID and people got to work from home and, hopping on Zoom or remote calls, and we got to see the pets and we got to see their background and some of their houses, piece of their home or their artwork behind them. And so I think that helped people see each other as more human beings rather than you're just the guy in the next cubicle, right? So I think that has helped somewhat to make people realize that we all have more than just one area of our lives. There's a coffee shop near us that I love the name. It's called Sonder, Sonder. And they have the definition for the word Sonder up on the wall. When you walk in, it's painted up on the wall and it says, the realization that everyone around you is living a dynamic life, right? It's like, it's such a good reminder that everybody has stuff going on in their world and everybody has a full, well-rounded life. And sometimes we only get to see a sliver of that. And so I think, showing up as the best sliver of that you can, to share with other people is really helpful. And knowing your values. You mentioned the values exercise, right? So I have a values exercise. I'm happy to send you the link if you want to put it in the link. People can download it. It's really, you can do it, on your own. It takes about 20 minutes, but it's really good to have those values and know what do you stand for? What brings you joy? What fulfills you, right? How do you want to show up as that human being, whether it's at work or in a volunteer situation or, as a parent or whatever it is.
Now, I think this is an interesting segue because you've written a couple of books, but the one that I
Mhm.
specifically want to talk about, and I'm going to grab it here, is Vitamin
I
C3.
too.
Vitamin C3 for Business: 52 Ideas to Connect, Contribute, and Celebrate Your Way to Success. And while the main audience for your book honestly seems to be entrepreneurs, which makes sense, you're a business coach, a lot of what you're suggesting in the book could really easily apply to those who are employed in a traditional sense. So I would love for you to just talk a little bit about how you see the principles of connect, contribute, and celebrate influencing modern work cultures, whether that person is an entrepreneur or maybe someone in a traditional corporate environment.
Yeah. Yeah. I think those three words are so powerful for me, and they always have been powerful for me. But I think even in the work environment, that connection to other people, to your other coworkers, right, is really important. I just heard a story on NPR this weekend. They were talking about a report that birthday parties are being phased out of the corporate culture, right? Because nobody wants to celebrate them. And people realize that, during COVID, they didn't celebrate the birthdays together. And it made me sad because I know they can be a little cliche, like, oh, let's all sing happy birthday and have the cake in the conference room. But that's a chance to connect on something that's non-work related at the work office. And it just gives you that connection piece is so important to other human beings. And I'm definitely an ambivert. I can be extroverted a lot, but I do need my quiet space to recharge. And I know for more introverted people, they're like, oh, I have to go interact with people in the conference room for a birthday party. Get that stupid piece of cake. But I think that just that human connection is so important to us as a society. And especially at the people that you're spending a lot of time with, 40, 50 hours a week with these people, that connection, a deeper connection, other than you're the person I hand my timesheet to, or you're the person that sends me this spreadsheet every month or something like that, right? The more you can build that connection, the better off your working relationships are going to be. And the more joy you're going to feel because you feel connected, right? It's a natural human instinct to want to feel connected to other people. And so I think the more you can build those connections within your workspace, within your work coworkers, the more you're going to be able to enjoy it, right? And contribution's the same thing. So like I said, if you raise your hand and say, how can I contribute? How can I see a problem here? Everybody's complaining about this. How can I contribute to the solution and not contribute to the problem? And so I think that's part of that as well. It's just like, what can I do to make the workplace better? And I know there's a lot of talk about, how workers are they just are punching the clock and they don't really want to be there and that kind of thing. I think the more we can stay connected to each other and connected to the purpose of what we're doing, and then be able to see what our contribution is doing to help the entire business reach its mission or vision or goals, then that makes it more joyful for me to do my work, right? If I understand that doing this spreadsheet correctly is going to help this person do their job correctly, which then helps the salesperson make more sales, whatever it is. If you can see how you're connected into the work that you're doing, into the bigger picture, then that brings us more joy. It makes us feel more connected, right? So those contributions can help as well. And then the celebration, I just think we don't celebrate enough anytime. So that's what, again, when I was like, please don't stop the birthday celebrations. It's one thing we can all celebrate. We all know how to celebrate it. But I think we go about our day setting the next task list, the next to-do list, and the next rung up the ladder. And we don't take time to stop and celebrate what we have accomplished or what we are accomplishing for each other and for ourselves, especially for ourselves. And especially as entrepreneurs, I know in the workplace, there's, they kind of sometimes try to force celebrations on you, which is maybe why the birthday parties are not, are not going well. But I think if you can make it so that people understand why we're celebrating this thing, how it, again, ties to the contributions made by the people and to the connection of the work that they do, then that just takes the celebration to a deeper level, right? Because we all want to be recognized and seen and rewarded for what we're doing, for stepping up and taking on that extra project or showing up as a solution. We want to be recognized and celebrated for that. And sometimes that's just, an email that says, hey, good job, or I noticed this, I saw you do this, right? It doesn't have to be necessarily monetary or a party or anything like that. But I think that stopping to celebrate, even celebrating our own accomplishments, when we hit that goal or we get that big project done, taking a moment and taking yourself, just taking a walk around the building and just say, I did it. I got that done, instead of just like, okay, that's done, on to the next thing, right? So I think that helps us find more joy in our work when we stop to celebrate.
There's some really interesting parallels between these concepts you've put together, Mary, and some of the philosophies that I have just established through my corporate career. And so, when I think about connect, I often urge my clients to think about, for example, like their professional brand and how they're building that and what component of that has to do with connecting with other people, right? And so in a corporate environment, it would be more of like that cross-functional connections to departments that maybe you don't work with regularly, in hopes of increasing your visibility, being kind of more in the know about all the different projects that are happening. And I see this now coming to the entrepreneur side, which is your area of specialty, and being an entrepreneur, you're connecting with vendors and other small businesses. And so there's some parallel into that skill set. And then when you were talking about contribution, I couldn't help but think about people who are in positions in a corporate environment who's unfortunately their leaders haven't really expressed how that connection of their work fits to what you were just saying about how do I connect to the bigger goals of the organization? How does my work impact these bigger things that this organization is doing? How am I contributing to the success? And it's so important, to your point, to understand how our work impacts. And I often find too, in like the career space, especially, if someone plans to make a pivot from a job and they're working on their resume, they often have a hard time explaining the impact of their work to the greater organization. And so it's important that we're thinking about these things, right? How are we contributing? What is our impact to whatever it is we're doing, whether that be our own businesses or, a part of a larger organization? And I sadly just read an article that said people are drinking less champagne because they're celebrating less. And so
Oh,
I think we start here and now, Mary. We just help
yes,
everyone think about celebrating. Of course, you don't always have to have champagne to celebrate, but
right.
it certainly is an anecdotal indication that we are not celebrating enough. So
Yes, yes. I have these little hand flappers, little applause
I love
makers,
it.
made because I have a keynote called The Power of Celebration. And so I get these out to the audience so that they can keep them at their desk. And I keep mine right here. And every once in a while, it's like, yay, round of applause for Mary. I did it. Right. So it may seem silly to some people, but even just that little 5 seconds of clapping for myself, it resets your brain. And it's like, yay, I did something worth celebrating. So all of those little tasks now become something to celebrate, right? And all of those little milestones along the way to get to the bigger thing, you've stopped and celebrated them in some way, which gives you that motivation to keep going and just helps us get to that bigger celebration. But sometimes, or many times, people wait until they get to the big thing and then they celebrate, or they might say they're going to celebrate and then they forget and they just move on, right? So that makes me sad. I just want to wait.
Yeah. Now, I recently listened to you on another podcast, Mary. And so you
Uh-huh.
were on Soul Stirred Stories of Growth and the Human Experience. And one of the things that I personally took away from the conversation that you had was the role curiosity played in how you navigated your early career. And you actually mentioned curiosity earlier in this episode. And so what I'm really wanting to understand is how curiosity has played a role or how you've navigated that, not only in your career, but how that's transitioned you to entrepreneurship. And I just want to understand how curiosity has also impacted things like joy in work, these concepts, the C3 of connect, contribute, and celebrate. And so just I know this is a little philosophical, it's a little high level, but I personally believe curiosity is so important, and clearly you do as well. And so I just really want to hear your perspective on curiosity, Mary, and how it's influenced all these other factors.
Yes, I love this question. I have so many answers running through my mind. So we'll see what comes out of my mouth, right? I'm curious to see how I'm going to answer this question. Um, let me begin by going back to the beginning, right? So when I said I always have been, how can I find the positive in the situation, right? Little Pollyanna, if you will. I think that comes from being curious and asking the question, how can I make the situation better? And that's a form of curiosity, right? So noticing that there's something that's an issue somewhere, or that something could be better or could be improved. And then it's saying, how could I contribute to that? And then being open to whatever that looks like. I think I talked about on the other podcast, one of my favorite questions is I wonder. And when I was still in the corporate world, I was running the law firm and, doing my 9 to 5 thing. I knew it was time for me to move on because I had done everything I could do in that place, right? And so I was like, do I go get another job? Do I, where do I want to work? I don't know. My kids were still in high school, so I was like, do I want to get a job downtown? Where would I commute? And all this kind of stuff, right? So I'm having those inner conversations with myself, thinking, what's next? And I had a friend of mine tell me to start asking myself, I wonder what my next job will look like. I wonder if I'll have to commute. I wonder if I'll have an office with a window. I wonder what my window will look out on, So just I wonder questions to spark that curiosity and to start opening up potentials, right? And I started to see all of these signs. And then they were encouraging me, this group I was in was encouraging me to start my own business. And I was like, I don't even know what I would do. I've always been a W-2 employee. And so I started asking myself, I wonder what kind of business I could run. I wonder what kind of people I would work with. I wonder what kind of services I could provide, right? And things just started showing up over and over and over again. So when you start facing a problem with curiosity, instead of stress or anxiety, like, oh my gosh, I got to find a new job and what's it going to be like? And all that stress that can come around that. I just faced it with a sense of curiosity. Like, I wonder what, would it, can I start my own job or my own business? What would it look like? What would I do? And then I just started paying attention to the signs and the things that were popping up in front of me and the ideas that I would have and the most random places, right? So there was a book on starting a virtual assistant company at the middle school book fair I was volunteering at. Like, why was that book there? Right? At a book fair for middle schoolers, but there was a how to start your own virtual assistant business, book there. And I was like, oh, maybe that's what I'm supposed to do. And that's what I did. So yeah, I think curiosity just plays such a strong role in having a more joyful life, right? That the other question is what if, right? And sometimes people can take that to what if in a negative, like what if, I get in a car crash, or what if this happens, or what if the economy tanks, or what if, and they can go the negative way. Again, it's just shifting or reframing to what if the positive can happen, right? I wonder, or what if, asking yourself those open-ended questions and spinning it towards the positive can really put curiosity to your best advantage, right? That's what curiosity means to me. It's like it opens up the potential. And if you spin it, you can spin curiosity in a negative way and you can spin it in a positive way. So again, based on your natural tendencies, you're going to know, do I tend to spend things more negatively? Then how do I reframe it to say, what if something wonderful can happen today? What if I can start my own business and it can be successful? What if I can land a new job that makes me happier and gives me more whole life balance, right? So, or I wonder what that job would be. I wonder what that company would look like, right? So just start asking yourself those questions. And then those are my two favorite curiosity questions. I wonder and what if.
Yeah, there's another one I'd like to add, Mary, and it really comes from someone I've actually been working with recently who, to your point, kind of had like not a negative outlook, but they thought they were on a career path that was taking them in a very specific direction. And there's an aspect of this career path that they're not necessarily excited about. It kind of isn't, it's not in alignment with the things that they currently value. And so they've been going through the curiosity exercise to say like, well, how am I going to make this work? This thing that I don't like, how am I going to make it work? And so through our processes, we started talking about, well, what do you want to happen, right? Like if this isn't the path you want to go down, like what would your ideal situation look like? And then how might you make that happen, right? And so that would just be another way of like reframing the curiosity, because it's, I think it's great that curiosity is such a wonderful tool. I lead my life with a lot of curiosity as well. And so I really resonate with that, Mary. But to your point, sometimes it can be negative, right? Like, what if this really bad thing happens? What am I going to do? And to me, that's more like, how am I going to make this bad thing work? Instead of thinking like, how might I just avoid this bad thing? Like, how might I make the thing I want happen, instead of worrying about how to overcome this obstacle that has yet to happen. And so there's always this like, how might we? And I think it's such a great tool for innovation because, sometimes when we're trying to solve a problem, we get into like really binary thinking where like there's only one or two paths to solve this problem. But when we lead with more curiosity, especially when it's like a positive mindset curiosity, we start to open up a lot more ways of solving problems. And we sometimes come up with solutions that we wouldn't have if we hadn't sort of opened our minds.
Yes, yes. I try to emphasize that with my clients as well, because we get stuck in this, it's A or B. There's only two choices. And there's often 4 or 5 or 6 choices. We just limit ourselves to 2. And so if we just take a step back and say, I wonder if there's another way to look at this, right? Then there you might see option C, D, E, and F, right? That we didn't think about before. So I love the question, how might I make it happen? Because I'm an action person, right? I love putting action plans together for my clients and helping them take action on something that they want. And so that's a great question. I'm going to add that into my repertoire. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I mean, I can't take credit for it. It's, working in tech for so long, those types of questions are often very common in like innovation frameworks and that sort of thing. But I do find it interesting sometimes taking my my corporate experience and applying it to some like life lessons, like in the tech space, they talk a lot about things being in and out of scope. And so, I think it's really interesting to take that same application and think, okay, with my values, is this in or out of scope? And it helps you really start to differentiate the things that make sense, for you when you're making decisions. And so many great applications. How do you feel like curiosity played a role in leading you to developing like your book, the concepts of connect, contribute, and celebrate? Like how do you kind of feel like those things came together for you?
Yes, I was feeding one of my other values, which is creativity. I was in a networking group with this gentleman who's one of my best friends now, and he's come paddleboarding with us many times. And he was working on a novel, a fiction novel. And he's like, I need just a writing buddy. And I was like, hey, I'll do that with you. So for a year, we met at a coffee shop every Monday morning for about an hour. And we created this, he was working on his novel, but he's like, I just need to keep my writing skills up and just be writing every week. And I was like, I like to write. I wasn't working on a book or anything. I'd written my other book a few years before, and I didn't have plans to write another one. And in our writing, I I learned several things, right? Being curious about how my writing could take place. We had these prompts that we put in an envelope, random things that we would pick one out and say, okay, let's write about this for 20 minutes. We'd set a timer, write for 20 minutes, and then read it back to each other. I learned I don't write fiction very well. I can't keep a conversation going between characters. One of them turns into just a long monologue. So it's like, okay, I like just giving advice. I don't want to have conversations around it. But that's, learning about your creative style and all that kind of stuff. And then in all of the writings, over a period of about 4 or 5 months, I kept seeing these three words show up in almost everything I was writing. There was some form of connection, contribution, celebration. And I was like, these three words keep propping up everywhere. What's the deal? So then I got curious, right? What could I do with these three words? Do I need to turn it into a blog post? What do I need to do with this content? And then I was like, hey, I like ideas. I like giving monologues, right? I like giving advice. I don't, not the conversation style. So why don't I create a tips book around these ideas? And then once I did that, the ideas came quickly. It's like, okay, here's, 10 or 12 for connect. Here's this many for celebration, right? And so then it just kind of fell together pretty quickly, naturally after that. So the curiosity and being open to being creative and seeing what was going to show up, really led to this book. And in the back of the book, I originally had thought this was going to be a 3-part series, right? Vitamin C3, this one's for business. Then I talk about vitamin C3 for your community, because that's how important I think connection, contribution, and celebration are so important as a community in our society. And then vitamin C3 for your family, which I come from a really large family and we're very connected. We've created our own holidays and all kinds of fun stuff. So, but how do you connect, contribute, and celebrate within your family structure? So those books, I've started them, I gathered files for them, and every once in a while I'll pick one up and say, okay, is it time to write this book? And it's never really been the time. They're in there, they'll come out eventually. But I do just find that those three words really are so important to me as a human being, in all my areas of life, but I focus this one on business just because that's where I was, my headspace was at. So that's the one I started with. But I do think, thank you for pointing out that they do apply to other areas of your life as well.
Yeah, I honestly, as I was looking through some of your tips, Mary, I was seeing how a lot of these could work also for like my clients in the career coaching space, and how they could contribute to people developing their careers. And so I don't know, maybe you need to do like an adaptation for the corporate worker, just some small tweaks, and boom, you've got a new book. So
Yeah. Yes. I'll add that to the list. Yeah.
definitely. It's probably the least lift too, because you would just have to change a few words, and then you'd be off to the races.
Yes. Yes. Good idea. Good
I
idea.
would say though, for until you do that though, people listening, even if you're in a corporate setting, there's a lot of really great tips in here, and the way Mary has laid this book out, is that you just have one tip a week. So you kind of have like almost like a challenge or a homework assignment, or trying to think of some like other words that might resonate with people. But, you sort of tackle it one challenge at a time. And it's really a lot of like connecting and networking and things that I think that anyone, extroverted, introverted, employed, entrepreneurial, anyone could really take these things and find a way to incorporate them into their lives. And I think that they would feel joy from that experience of sort of following these steps. And so I do recommend this book for anyone who is listening, entrepreneurial or otherwise.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. It still makes me happy. It's just such a fun, colorful, it brings joy to me every time I even see the cover. So that means it's on the right track, right? For me, it's aligned with who I am and how I want to show up in the world.
Totally. Now, Mary, we are getting close to the end of our conversation, and I do really love to end every session by saying, if someone said this conversation was too long, I did not listen. What is like the one thing that you'd want them to take away from the chat that we've had?
I would go back to the beginning and say the two things that are going to make the most impact in your life are how to reframe any situation to a more positive spin, right? So how can I look at the situation I'm in and find some positive aspect of it? And sometimes that happens more with time as time goes by, like getting laid off or whatever can feel devastating at the time, but then 6 months later, like that was the best thing that ever happened to me, right? So how can I find the positive? How can I reframe this into something positive? And then the second thing is how can I get more curious? So, how can I ask the question to contribute? How can I make a difference, right? So reframing your question, how might I make that happen to make something more positive come out of the situation? So raising your hand, stepping up and taking action to make that shift of if something is negative to make it into more of a positive or be a solution to the problem.
I think there's a lot of benefits in the conversation that we had, and I'll put a lot of your resources in our show notes because I do think that you have a lot to offer. Even those who might be listening who are like, "Well, I'm not a business owner, I'm not an entrepreneur." I do think that there's a lot of parallels to the information that you've created and some of the philosophies that you promote, some of the training you provide. So thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I just love being part of this conversations and thinking deeper. And you had some great questions for me today that challenged me to rethink some of the things that I just, intrinsically know and do, but it's fun to be able to share that and put it into words again. So thank you for having such great questions for me today, Heather.
If you enjoyed this episode and are seeking to redefine success on your own terms, subscribe to Small Acts of Rebellion and join a community that celebrates authenticity and personal growth.